Hey guys, it's Alexandra from EyeLoveKnots.com. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make Grammy's Granny Square Afghan. This Afghan is really special. Anytime there was a wedding in the family, our Grammy would make this Afghan and give it to the lucky couple as a gift. Our Grammy is no longer with us and my cousin is getting married, so I am continuing the tradition. The tradition is Red Heart Super Saver, so I have that, which is a worsted weight yarn. This gray color is light gray. I have soft navy and shocking pink. These are the colors chosen by the recipients. The other part of the tradition is it is one large granny square about the size of a baby blanket, and then it's 3 by 4. So it's going to be a really large, oversized Afghan. I'm going to show you how to work up the squares, then I'll show you how to crochet them together, and then we'll put a border on it, weave in all of our ends, and it'll be ready for gifting. Alongside this worsted weight yarn, I'm going to be working with an H8 5mm crochet hook. For my colors, I didn't want it to look too much like a baby blanket or like a, tween girls blanket because it's going to be going to my cousin and his wife. So I just added the pops of color in there and I really focused on the gray, and I'm super happy with how it came out. But it would look really nice in big blocks of color or just one color altogether. So that's completely up to you. I've worked 2 different versions up. As I said, I'm going to be turning this into a bigger blanket, so some of my squares are going to be worked in this pattern. And for this one, I did 1 gray, 1 pink, 1 gray, 1 blue. Then I went up to 2 gray, 1 pink, 2 gray, 1 blue. Then I went up again, 3 gray, 1 pink, 3 gray, 1 blue. And finally I finished it here with 4 gray, 1 pink, and 4 gray. And that's where I stopped because that was as big as I needed my square to be. This square is a little bit shy of 30 inches. And another version that I did, which this is the one I'm going to show the tutorial for, I started with 6 rounds of gray in the middle, then 1 pink, 6 rounds of gray, then a blue, 6 rounds of gray and a pink, and finish it off with 6 rounds of gray, and it's the same size as the other square. I'm going to have 2 squares in my blanket that are going to be like this. Alright, so this is a really big square and most of the pattern is worked exactly the same. You're just adding additional squares, more repeats. So I'm only going to show you a few rows to get you started. I'm going to show you how to change colors. I'm going to show you how to take gauge, and then we will weave in our ends. Gauge is not terribly essential for this, unless the finished size is essential to you. But if it is, I will show you how to take gauge after a couple rounds, and if you're spot on, you're good. If you're measuring larger or smaller, then you'll want to go down or up a hook size. But if gauge is not important to you, then it does not matter. You just go with the flow. I'm going to start with a slip knot. I'm starting with gray yarn, so I have it here pulled over my fingers. Wrap it around my index finger 2 times. Hold the tension with my thumb and my middle finger. Then pull the loop on the left up and over the other loop, but not off my finger. Then I'll pull the loop on the left now up over the other one and off my finger. Grab my crochet hook, insert it into the loop on my finger, and pull it off. I'll hold the working yarn in my right hand and pull the short tail end so I can bring this knot to normal tension. We're going to start with a chain of 5 and then we'll slip stitch join to form a ring. To chain, we're going to yarn over and pull through the loop on our hook. Yarn over, pull through the loop on our hook. Yarn over, pull through the loop on our hook. That gives us these V shapes here. Each one of these chains is a stitch. That's 3 chains. We're going to continue so that we have 5. And then we're going to go to the very first chain that we worked down at the bottom. I'm going to rotate this horizontally. Take my crochet hook, insert it right into the center of that first chain. Then I will yarn over, pull through that stitch and through the loop that's on my hook. That is a slip stitch join, and it forms this ring so that we can work our next round into. If you're looking right where you slip stitch, there's a hole there. That is because that knot is not secured from the slip knot, so it's going to continue to open as we work. You don't want to work your stitches into that hole. You want to work into the center hole, the much bigger hole in the center. As we work this next round, we're going to take our tail end and hold it to the back of our chains the whole entire time so we can crochet over it. For round 1, we're going to start with a chain 2. And this chain 2 is going to count as our first double crochet from the very first cluster. We're going to work 2 double crochets into that center ring. To do a double crochet, we're going to yarn over. Then insert the hook right into the center hole of that ring. And when we do that, we're going to have the chains on our hook, as well as the tail end that we're holding to the back. Then yarn over, pull through. There are 3 loops on our hook right now. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, insert your hook into the center ring. Yarn over, pull through. 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. These 3 stitches here complete our first cluster, and each cluster is going to be built of 3 double crochets. First corner here is going to be chain 3. Then we're going to work back into that center ring, 3 double crochets. Let's work 1 more double crochet together, yarn over, insert your hook into the center ring, and in this case you have the chains on your hook and the tail end. Yarn over and pull through. There are 3 loops on your hook. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. Yarn over, pull through 2 loops. We'll work 2 more double crochets into that center ring. And now we have our second cluster done there. 3 double crochets equals a cluster. We'll work another corner, chain 3. Then we'll work 3 more double crochets back into that center ring. Next corner is going to be chain 3. Then we need 1 more cluster. We have 3 clusters and we need 1 more worked into that center ring, so 3 more double crochets there. And now we've reached our last corner. And for this last corner on the first round only, which is this round that we're working, instead of doing a chain 3, I do a chain 2. For some reason, I feel like when you do a chain 3 here, it kicks this side out and it just makes it a weird shape. So this round only, I do chain 2 for the last one. And then we're going to slip stitch join to the top of the beginning chain 2. So here you can see the chain 2. At the bottom of it is the first chain, and at the top of it is the second chain. We're going to insert our hook right into the center of that chain. Then yarn over and pull through that stitch and through the loop on our hook. We're going to slip stitch join to the top chain of the beginning chain 2 every single time we complete a round. And here is round 1 finished. The whole entire time we crocheted over our tail so that we could come back here, hold onto the fabric. I have my fingers on either side of the hole, and then you can pull on that tail and it'll close up that beginning ring. Now as I work, that ring is going to open back up, so I'm not going to worry about it too much, but when I go to weave in my ends, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pull it closed and then I will weave it in. I'm going to work a couple more rounds and then I'm going to show how to change colors. If you want to change colors here for the second round, you're going to want to make sure to go down into the description box and click on the timestamp that says how to change colors. I'm going to do 6 rounds before I change colors, so that will be a little bit later on in the video. But if you want to do it at any point between now and then, just go into the description box, click the timestamp for it, and it will take you directly to that clip. Let's go ahead and start round 2. For each round, we're going to do the same thing. We've just slip stitched into the top chain. Now we're going to slip stitch over to the chain space. So that means slip stitch into each of the next 2 double crochets and then slip stitch into the chain space of the corner. So insert your hook into the next stitch, picking up both loops of that stitch. Then yarn over and pull through that stitch and the loop that's on your hook. Slip stitch into the next double crochet. And then insert your hook into the chain space underneath the chains and complete your slip stitch. And now we're ready to begin the second round of clusters. And now we're going to begin here with a chain 2. We're always going to start with a chain 2 for our granny stitch clusters, and that chain 2 counts as the first double crochet of the cluster. Here in the corners, we're always going to work the same exact way. In this case, we're starting with a chain 2, but if you were working in the next one, you would start with the double crochet first. But the corners are going to have 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets, always. So here for this first one, chain 2, then 2 double crochets, inserting your hook right into the center of the chain space. That completes the first set of clusters, then chain 3, and then 3 more double crochets back into that same space. And it sort of looks like I don't have enough room, but if you just hold the fabric in your left hand and pull on the stitches with your right, it'll slide right down that chain, giving you more space. And there's our first corner. And each corner will be built exactly like this: 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets. In between our clusters in the center, we're going to have a chain 1. Now we're back to another corner, so it's going to be 3 double crochets, then chain 3, 3 more double crochets back into that chain space. And again, if you need more space, just hold the fabric with your left hand and just pull down the stitches and they'll just slide right down the chain. There's my second corner. Chain 1 in the center, then another corner, 3 double crochets, chain 3, and then 3 more double crochets right back into that same chain space. In the center we chain 1. We have 1 more corner left and we're going to do it the same way, 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 more double crochets back into that same chain space. And now we've reached the beginning. We're going to work one more chain one here in the middle, then insert into the top chain of the beginning chain 2. On the bottom's the first chain, on the top is the top chain, the second chain. Insert right into the center and complete your slip stitch. And now round 2 of our granny square is finished. In the next round that we're about to work, it's pretty much going to lay the foundation for the pattern, and all the rest of the rounds will be worked pretty much just like round 3, just with additional repeats. To begin the next round, we do it the same way as we did round 2. Slip stitch into each of the next 2 double crochets, and then slip stitch into the chain space. This way we slip stitch over to the chain space of the corner. And then we start with a chain 2, 2 double crochets into this chain space, chain 3, 3 more double crochets into that same exact chain space, there's the first corner. In the center, we chain 1. We have one space here in between these 2 clusters. In that space in the center is where we're going to work our next cluster. So 3 double crochets right into the center of that space. Then we chain 1 because we're still in the center. Now in the next corner here, we're going to work 3 double crochets. Then chain 3. And 3 more double crochets back into that same corner chain space. Second corner done, and the whole side there. Working in the center, we chain 1. In the next chain space that's in the center of the square right now, in between those 2 clusters, we're going to work 3 double crochets. And then since we're still in the center, we chain 1. Next corner chain space, 3 double crochets. Chain 3. Then 3 double crochets back into that same exact chain space. Chain 1. 3 double crochets into that next chain space. Chain 1. For our last corner, we're going to work 3 double crochets. Then chain 3. 3 double crochets back into that same chain space. Then we chain 1, work 3 double crochets into that center chain space. Chain 1, then slip stitch join to the top chain of the beginning chain 2. And I'm just going to pull up a loop here so we don't lose it, but there is round 3 of our granny square. And round 3 is how you see the pattern come together, and it's going to continue to build on top of that. So for every additional round that we work here, you are going to start it the same way. You are going to slip stitch over into the chain space. You will start with a chain 2, then work 2 double crochets in there, chain 3, and then work 3 more double crochets back into that first corner. Working in the center here, not in the corner. When I say in the center, I mean not in the corner. In the corner is the only spot you're going to work a chain 3. Everywhere else, you're going to work a chain 1. So after you've just finished your corner, you're going to chain 1, and then you're going to work 3 double crochets into that next chain space. Then you're going to chain 1, and then work 3 double crochets into the next chain space. And then you're going to chain 1, and you've reached the next corner. And then you start again in that corner, 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets. Then you're working in the center, chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next chain space, then chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next chain space, then chain 1, and then you've reached your next corner. Looking back to the previous round, round 2, we had the 2 corner chain spaces and 1 chain space in the middle. So for this round that we just finished, we were able to work the corners there into those chain spaces, and then 1 cluster into that chain space in the middle. Now we have the 2 chain spaces of the corner, and in the middle we have 2 chain spaces. So when we work this next round, round 4, we're going to have clusters that are worked into each of those chain spaces there in the center. After we finish round 4, you will have 3 chain spaces in the center, and so on. It's going to grow by 1 chain space on each side, each remaining round. And you're just going to continue working the same pattern, just add more repeats of chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next chain space. Before we move on here, I want to discuss the shaping that you might see. You want your granny square to be even on the sides. Depending on your tension, it might change here. So if you're currently working and your square is puffing out in the center, then that means that you need to go back, rework it, and take out the chain 1 spaces in between. Instead of chaining 1 and then working your cluster, you would skip that chain 1, you would omit it, and just work your cluster into the next space. It's still going to create a space for you to work into, since we're skipping the stitches of the clusters, but it's going to give you a straight edge. So if your square is puffing out in the center only, on both sides it would look like it, then that means that you need to go back and omit the chain 1. Just work clusters in between the spaces and do not chain 1. You will still chain 3 in the corners. If your square is taking a butterfly shape where the sides are sort of coming in on itself, then it means that you need to go back and add a chain here. Instead of chaining 1, you would chain 2 in the center only. In the corners, you're still going to chain 3. This is a tension thing. Everybody crochets a little bit differently, and that's why there's a couple different options. So just look at your square as it is right now, and if it looks pretty even, then you're good to go. If it is puffing out, then you'll want to omit the chain 1 in between the clusters. And if it's butterflying by going inward, then you're going to want to go back and add another chain. Let's stop for a moment and take our gauge here after round 3. You're going to need your soft tape measure. You'll lay it on the edge of the left side, directly across the middle, and measure over to the edge of the right side. and this is going to be 4 inches wide. Each round should go up by about an inch. So if you want this to come out the same size as the measurements I've provided, then you're going to want to measure your gauge here. If you're measuring larger, you'll go down a crochet hook size. And if you're measuring smaller, then you'll go up a crochet hook size and rework your sample. Then measure it and see where you are. If you don't mind if your square comes out a little bit smaller or a little bit larger, then just go ahead and continue working. Alright, for round 4 of the granny square, we're going to slip stitch over into the chain space, chain 2, 2 double crochets into this chain space corner, chain 3, 3 double crochets into the same corner, chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next chain space, chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next chain space, chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next corner, chain 3, 3 double crochets into that same corner chain space, and now you're ready to start your side again. Chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next chain space, chain 1, 3 double crochets into the next chain space, chain 1. We've reached the next corner. You're going to repeat it exactly the same. Go ahead and work that side and the last side, and I'll be back with you so we can slip stitch. There's my last stitch of the round. I'm going to chain 1 here and then slip stitch join to the top chain of the beginning chain 2. And there's round 4. You can see how the shaping in the center is growing. I'm not going to continue showing each round since they're all worked exactly the same. Just adding an additional chain 1 and cluster in the center. I am going to work off camera so that I have 6 rounds complete, and then I'm going to be back to show you how to change colors. Alright, I've worked 6 rounds up to my last cluster. I'm going to work the chain 1 here, and we're going to get ready to change colors for the next round. I'm going to show you 4 ways that I use to change colors, and I change it up depending on the project that I'm working and how I'm feeling. I know that doesn't really help you exactly figure it out. I'm going to end with my preferred way, the best way that I like to do it for the most seamless look. But I'm going to show you the other ways too, and you can decide what works best for you. Now, these are the 4 ways that I personally use. There might be some other ways out there too. So these are not the only 4 ways that it can be done. I've just worked my last chain 1. All the join methods that I'm going to show you are going to start the same way. We're going to slip stitch join to the top chain of the beginning chain 2, Then I'm going to slip stitch over into each of the next 2 double crochets here. And I slip stitch all the way over in the previous color so that the color is consistent throughout the round. Alright, the first way I'm going to show you, insert your hook into the corner chain space. Do not complete your slip stitch. We're going to pull our new color through at the last yarn over. Since the slip stitch is a much smaller stitch, there's not much to it, so we've inserted our hook in there, grab the new color, put it on my hook. This is the last yarn over of this stitch. Pull it through to complete that slip stitch. Now I've just finished the round in the gray, and I'm ready to start with the pink, my new round. And I'll just work a chain 2 so you can see. Then for this pink tail that's down here in the chain space, I would just work my first corner over it, and as you will work over that tail end, holding it to the back of the chains, and it will cover up the whole entire thing. I have 1 stitch left of this corner. I'm going to drop that tail end, work my last stitch, and pull up a loop. And now that pink tail is hidden and you've worked in your new color. You can see this loop right here is visible. After you work your last cluster here and you join, it's going to have this little sliver of color over your pink. So this is the reason why I do not use this join method very often, but it is probably the most common way to change colors, not in the granny square pattern, but in crocheting in general. You can tug on that gray and that loop will go down, so it's not quite as visible, but now you can see up close, you can see the pink strand on the bottom, the gray strand in the middle, and then the pink stitches above it. And for the tail, the reason why I leave off the last stitch is so that when I go to weave in my ends, I can go through that last stitch and into the bulk of that corner. Alright, that's way number 1. For way number 2, I'm going to slip stitch into the corner chain space as normal with my gray. I've just completed the entire row there and slip stitched all the way over. Grab my new color now, put it on my hook, pull it through that loop, then pull down on the gray yarn so that loop disappears. And now I'm ready to start with my pink. Chain 2, and I will work over both tail ends here for this corner. Just inserting my hook into that chain space as normal and crocheting over the chains and both tail ends. And I do it the same way. I've worked up to the last stitch, dropped the tails, and then work my last double crochet, and that's for weaving purposes. Now this is probably my second favorite way to do it. I'm tugging on that gray yarn, and you can see that that gray loop has disappeared. The one that you had on your hook, we pulled it down and it has now disappeared. This is actually the way that I do it in a lot of my projects because it gives me the most seamless color change. The only thing here that is the reason why it's not my go-to number 1 is because you've still changed colors up here in this gray stitch, whereas all the rest of your stitches have been worked into the corner chain space itself. So there's a little tiny gap there where you see the gray yarn and then your stitches start. If I was going to carry my yarn up the square, I would use this method because I'm not going to be fastening off my yarn, I'm going to be carrying it up the back. so I won't be able to join completely to this chain space. So I would use this method for the most seamless color change. I will show you an example. I have not been changing colors at the end of each round. I strategically did it in this granny square here so that there's 2 spaces, 2 spaces, 3 spaces, 3 spaces. And I carried up my yarn on the back. I stopped doing it after a few squares of this because it became a problem. Looking at the back of your square, you have this yarn running up and it sticks out like a sore thumb. So if you were going to change colors every single round, your carry would be less noticeable. But because I did it with so much gap in between, it is very noticeable on the back. And it posed problems for me at the end when it came to assembly and gifting. So my recommendation is not to use this method unless you're going to be changing at the end of each round. Unless you don't mind having this as the back of your blanket. It does work. The carrying method does work sometimes. It just didn't work for me in this particular project because of the way my colors are. But if I was going to carry my yarn up, then I would use this method. I would not crochet over my tails. I would just drop the tails. I would come here to the chain 2. I would push those tails to the back so I don't work over them. And then I would work my first corner here. And that would be so that when I come around after the last cluster and join, they're right there where I need them to carry up. Okay, that is number 2. This is my second favorite method, and this is what I use when I carry up my yarn. Number 3. I'm going to go ahead and slip stitch as normal into the chain space and fasten off my yarn. Pull up on the loop to break it and grab my new color. Make a slip knot. Put the slip knot on my hook. Then holding the yarn tail at the bottom and my working yarn over my fingers, I'm going to hold the loop on my hook with my right hand, yarn over, so there are 2 loops on there, then grab my granny square, go to that corner, insert my hook into the chain space, yarn over and pull through. That gives me 3 loops on my hook, yarn over, pull through 2 loops. It kind of moves around on you, so just be careful there. And then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. That gives you a double crochet there. And then continue on working your corner here, working over your gray tail to hide it. And I'm going to do the same thing. I've worked just the last 2, drop the tail end, work the 3rd one, pull up the loop there. And I do that so that I can go into that last stitch for weaving purposes. But by working over that tail end, I feel like it gives you a much smoother transition here. And you've worked every stitch into the chain space itself, so the stitching is even. And it actually gives you a better looking stitch here as the first stitch instead of the chain 2. You get an actual double crochet that is equal to all the rest of the stitches. And when you come around, you finish your last cluster, chain 1, you slip stitch join into that very first double crochet. The only reason why I don't use this method very much is because when I'm not changing colors, then I'm using a chain 2, so the look is different between the 2. That's the only reason why this is a really great way to tie on your yarn. Alright, my preferred method, number 4. Starts the same way. I worked over into the chain space. I fastened off my yarn and then pulled up on that loop, and I had the tail end here. Alright, take my crochet hook, insert it into the chain space corner, and this can be any corner. It doesn't have to be this one that we just fastened off, but that's where I always go. So I'm inserting my hook, grab my yarn and pull it through, all the way through. Then leaving a tail end I can comfortably weave in here. I'm going to just tie like the first part of a knot. Not a full square knot where I would tie it again, just one tie. And then pull the tails to the left side, insert my hook into that chain space again, yarn over and pull through, and then start with my chain 2. Then work over the tail ends, not working over them for the very last stitch as I have done with all the rest of the methods, and that's for weaving purposes. And you have the same look as what we did in number 3, but you start with a chain 2 that matches all the rest of the rounds. And I love this method for granny squares because all the stitches are worked into that chain space, so they all match. So if I'm not carrying up my yarn up the back of my square, this is how I change my yarn colors. The way that you change your yarn color is completely up to you, so whatever works best for you. If you use a different method, drop me a line below and let me know. I'm interested. Or if you use one of the methods that I use, let me know that too. Alright, now that I've started in this pink color, I'm going to go ahead and finish working all the way around, and then I'm going to change back to gray. I've gotten to the end of this round. I finished my last cluster, chained 1. Now I'm going to slip stitch join and slip stitch over into the chain space, and then fasten off my pink color. Pull up on the loop to break it, and then I'll go back to my gray yarn. Insert my hook into the corner chain space, pull the tail end through, then tie a knot. Move the tails to the left side, insert my hook back in, yarn over and pull through, and then chain 2, and I'm ready to go with the gray again. I'm going to go for another 6 rounds. Now I'm about to run out of gray yarn, so I'm going to be showing how to change yarn colors in the middle of the granny square. We're going to go back to that first method that I showed you of changing the yarn, where we do it in the last yarn over of the previous stitch. So here we're working double crochets, so we'll work the first half, yarn over, insert your hook into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, 3 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, leaving 2 loops on your hook, and we're going to pause here because this is the last step of the stitch. Grab our new ball, make a loop, leaving a tail end long enough to comfortably weave in. Put that loop on your hook, and this counts as the last yarn over. Then pull it through the 2 loops that were on your hook, and that completes the stitch. Then I just go to my tails and I tighten them down so that that stitch goes to normal tension. Drop the tails to the back, and then with my new ball, work my next stitch. In this case it's the 3rd double crochet of this cluster. And now you just continue working your stitches as normal in your new ball, and later on when you go back to weave in your ends, then you just take care of those 2 tails. I'm gonna go ahead and work off camera, but before I go, you're going to be working 27 rounds in total for this square, and then we'll sew all the squares together later. And again, this is going to create a very large oversized blanket of 90 by 120-ish, probably a little bit bigger than that. So if you're looking for a smaller granny square blanket, you can stop working rounds at any point as long as all of your squares have the same number of rounds. Then assembly will be a piece of cake and you'll have a custom made blanket to whatever size you're looking for. I've reached the very end here. I have the last cluster done. I'm going to chain 1 and slip stitch join to the top chain of the beginning chain 2. And now my granny square is finished, and I'm going to go ahead and fasten off. I'm just cutting to leave a tail end long enough I can comfortably weave in. Then I'll pull up on the loop to break it. Insert my hook from the wrong side to the right side into that stitch I just slip stitched to. Yarn over and pull the tail through to the wrong side. And now we're ready to weave in our ends. I sent my squares off to have the ends woven in. And I showed you how the back had this long, ugly tail that just ran up with a mixture of all the colors that I just carried up together. I want to show you here, it is the same exact square that once had the long tail run up right here, and Candace of T&C Crafters made this disappear like magic. You can see a little bit of the gray here in this pink box because she wrapped the pink around the gray to hide it. And then up here in this pink box you can see the same thing, that she wrapped the pink around the gray. She did the same thing here with this blue. She wrapped the blue around the gray, but you can't see it at all. I am super impressed. I am super happy. I was dreading the fact that I did that on all my squares and then I was going to have to line my blanket. I am not a great sewer. This is a huge blanket that I'm working on, and I was really worried about that. So she is a lifesaver. She takes custom orders. She does finishing services. I will pop the link to her shop in the description box below. She is awesome. I have enjoyed working with her a lot over the years. I have many ends to weave in on this square. I am only going to show 3. Let's start with the one that we just fastened off here at the end. I'm going to thread that into my tapestry needle. As I work my ends, I work them using the same exact method, no matter where it is in the project. I always do 3 passes. That's my magic number. That's what I feel most comfortable with. If you feel comfortable after 2, you can stop. And if you don't feel comfortable enough and you need to work a 4th, go ahead and do it. It's whatever you feel the most comfortable working, and it can vary from one end to the other. The other thing that I do instead of picking up the entire stitch on my needle is I insert it into the center of the stitch, breaking it in half, and then I work all the way across into several stitches, and when I exit, I also break that stitch in half. I do this every single time, and this is to help capture the tail end yarn within the project. So better ends, I don't have to worry about them coming out. I pull it through. You want it to lay natural and you don't want it to be bunched up. So in the event that your fabric looks bunched up or your stitches look distorted, just use your fingers to manipulate the fabric to make it look the way that you want, and then you're ready to continue. That's my first pass. I'm weaving into the bulkiness of the corner here. Insert into a nearby stitch, breaking it in half. Run back through several of the stitches I just worked and break my last stitch in half as I exit. Holding the fabric here in my left hand, I'm pulling the tail end through. That prevents the bunching. Then use my fingers to manipulate the fabric if I need to. That's 2 passes. Insert into a nearby stitch, breaking it in half. Run back through several of those stitches. Break the last stitch in half upon exit. Holding the fabric here with my left hand, I'm going to pull the tail end through, tighten a little bit, manipulate the fabric if needed, and then I'm ready to fasten that tail off. All the ones that I have here where I've joined in the corner, I'm going to work them in a similar manner. I'm going to weave into the bulkiness of the cluster stitch, preferably here at the corner. I will match colors, so for this pink one that's up here in the gray area, I will run it down so that it's into the pink below it. Same here, I will run this gray down into the gray below it. And I will continue doing that all the way here in each corner that I've joined. Where I've joined a new ball of yarn in the middle of a row, I have 2 ends here. You can see one on the top and one towards the bottom. I'm going to go with the direction that they are falling in. This one on the bottom, I'm going to weave it down into the cluster below it. And the one above it, I'm going to weave it into the current cluster that it's in. So this is the one here at the bottom. I'm going to weave it vertically here. I am going to break this first stitch in half as normal, run it down vertically through several parts of this double crochet stitch, and break the last part in half as well. And you can see when I tug on this that it bunches this last double crochet up, the one that we switched colors in. So I pull it back up with my fingers, manipulating the fabric here until it looks the way that I want. Then I'll insert into a nearby stitch down here. And each part I insert into, I break it in half. I want it to capture the best that it can here since there's less parts of it. I wanted to capture the yarn as best as possible so that I don't have to worry about my end wiggling out. And I sort of changed my directions up too. I might go here to the right to break this part in half. Then I'll come back. I might come here, wrap around the right to insert there to the left. Break that in half. Then I'll wiggle around here and I'll come back towards the right as I insert into the next part of my stitch. Here I'm going up into the center. And do the same thing, pull it, then use my fingers to manipulate the fabric if needed. And then I'll do it again, inserting here into a nearby stitch. And this time I'm just running down through the bulkiness of the stitches that I have created. And I'll pull it through. Give it a tug, manipulate the fabric if needed. If you need to work another pass, go ahead and do that. If not, you can go ahead and fasten off. I worked this one vertically because that's just what made the most sense to go with the placement of the tail. But this one up here on the top, I'm going to weave it in horizontally into the bulkiness of that cluster there. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and work a 4th pass, just for peace of mind. And now I'm ready to fasten those 2 off. And I've left a little bit of a tail there so that as the fabric is pulled and being used, that little tail will just slip right on in. Alright, one more type of end to weave in. That's going to be the very center one. This one I find the easiest to weave in after a few rounds at the beginning. It's still easy to get to if you stick your finger into one of the chain spaces to give yourself some support. The first thing I'm going to do here is work clockwise underneath all of those stitches until I get back to the very beginning. So I'm just inserting my needle here under some stitches, working directly across. And then I'll pull through, and then I'll continue here working directly across some stitches and pull, and then I have a few more. Right here, this gets me back to the beginning. I want to work a couple stitches past that, and then I'll pull through. Then I'll hold the fabric here in between my fingers and pull on the tail end. That's going to completely close up your ring. Then I hold the tension here with my thumb so that the fabric doesn't come loose. And now I'm going to insert into a nearby stitch here, breaking it in half. Run it under several stitches here, breaking the last stitch in half as I exit. Give it a tug. Then insert into a nearby stitch, breaking it in half, work back through several of those stitches I just worked, breaking the last stitch in half as I exit. Give it a tug. And for peace of mind, I'm just going to work one more here, insert into a nearby stitch, run back through several of those stitches and break the last stitch in half. I think is good, but just to be certain, I'm going to work this extra stitch. And now I can fasten that one off. And now I'm just going to keep going, weaving in all the rest of my ends. I'm going to be showing you how to work a continuous join using a clip from one of my other tutorials. It is on a smaller scale, but the same concept applies. For my Afghan, I worked 4 squares across and then 3 rows tall. So to do it the same way, you're going to want to make 3 stacks of 4 granny squares. You'll want all your granny squares to be facing the same direction so that when you grab them and go to attach them, they all have the same look. And I'm speaking in terms of the chain 2 up here at the top from where we started our round and joined. I lay all my squares out so that they're all facing the same direction, and I usually do it so that they're on the bottom, just because I think it hides it a little bit better. Now when working the continuous join, it creates the foundation round of the border, so round 1 is complete after you're done assembling all your squares and work all the way down the side back to the beginning. I did think that I was going to add extra height and extra width to that by working additional rounds of the border. After I finished joining all my squares and I laid it out on my king size bed, I noticed how much larger it was than my bed, so I decided not to add any additional rounds to the border because I did not need any extra height or width. It fit on the bed with plenty of room to spare. So for the Afghan that I made, I stopped after I joined the very last stitch in round 1. I will add in clips from that other project as well that will show you how to add additional rounds if you choose, working in regular single crochet. Once we're all finished, fasten off, weave in your remaining ends, and then we're all done. I like to do a continuous join. That means that you tie on once and you fasten off once. So 2 ends to weave in. It's all done in one continuous motion. And I'm also going to be using the pull loop through, or PLT, join method. That is one of my favorite methods to use, so I combine both of these together in most projects where I have to join pieces. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You could also mattress stitch all these squares together, or single crochet them all together, or whip stitch them all together. There's a lot of other ways that you can join granny squares, but I'm going to show you this particular method because I am not a huge fan of hand sewing, and I also don't really like the raised bump from the single crochet joins. So this continuous join with the pull loop through method that I'm about to show you is going to give me a flat, crisp finished edge that I just love, and super easy to do. We're going to start by working the bottom row. So I have my first square here, and I have my yarn. I'm going to find the bottom right chain space, and I'll rotate my fabric so I can get there. I'm going to insert my hook and pull this yarn through. You could also tie on here with a single crochet. You could make a slip knot and then prepare to single crochet, but I'm just going to tie it once. Then I'll pull the tail end so that I work my first single crochet over it. I'll insert my hook, pull that working yarn down so that I have a loop on my crochet hook, chain 1, and now I'm ready to begin. In this very first chain space, I'm going to single crochet. To single crochet, we insert our hook into the stitch. In this particular stitch, I'm also picking up the tail end on my crochet hook. So right now I have the chains on my hook and the tail end. Yarn over, pull through. There are 2 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pull through both loops. Then I'll grab that tail end and I'll just tug on it a little so that there's no slack and that knot is down to a normal size. And then I'm going to drop that tail end. I'm not going to crochet over it anymore. I'm going to weave it in at the end. I'm going to continue single crocheting, so in the next stitch I'll insert my hook into that stitch, picking up both loops of that V-stitch. Yarn over, pull through. There are 2 loops on my hook. Yarn over, pull through both loops. Single crochet into the next 2 double crochets. In the chain space is exactly the same. Insert your hook into the chain space, yarn over, pull through. 2 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through both loops. And I'll continue through the next cluster. Here I've reached the chain space. I'm going to work 1 single crochet into that stitch. Then I'll chain 1 and work 1 more single crochet into that same stitch. Then I work across the very top the same exact way, single crochet into each stitch and chain space across. And now I've reached the next corner. In the next chain space, we're going to work single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. Then we'll work downward to that very bottom chain space. This is how our square looks right now. We're going to get ready to join our next square to it. So for the next chain space, we're going to work just 1 single crochet. Then we're going to get our next square, and I'm going to rotate it so that I can work a stitch as normal into that chain space that matches. So right now, here's how it's laid out. This is the chain space that corresponds with the one that I just worked in. I'm going to just rotate that new square so that I can comfortably work a single crochet into that chain space. Now I'm going to pull up a loop so I don't lose this stitch, and I'm going to pull my hook out. Then I'm going to insert into the first stitch from the previous square. This is the corresponding stitch that goes with this one. So this is the one that's worked into the chain space of the previous square. That's the one I want that matches the other one. I'm going to insert my hook from the right side into that stitch, picking up both loops on my hook. Then I'm going to reinsert my hook into the loop that I pulled up from my new stitch. I'm going to tighten it back down to normal tension and pull it through that stitch. That is the pull loop through method. I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch from my new square. This is one that is connected to a double crochet. I'm going to single crochet into that stitch as normal. Then I'm going to pull up my loop, take out my crochet hook, find the corresponding stitch on my previous square, which is the very next stitch, insert from the right side, picking up both loops from that stitch. Then I'll reinsert my hook into the loop from my new stitch, tighten it back down to normal tension, and pull it through that stitch. I'll show you one more time. Single crochet into your current square as normal, pull up a loop, remove your crochet hook, find the corresponding stitch from your previous square, it's the very next stitch, insert from the right side, picking up both loops on your hook, reinsert into the loop from your current stitch, tighten it down to normal tension, and pull it through the loop. And you can see a little bit here how it's coming together. It kind of just looks a little twisted. That's the pattern that it's going to take. I'm just going to continue working up the row. In the chain space, you work it exactly the same way, single crochet in there. And then the corresponding stitch here. My next stitch on my current square is the chain space. I'm going to work my first single crochet of that corner in there, join as normal. And now I need to work a corner. Normally our corner is single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. So we've worked our first single crochet. Now we're going to work the stitch that takes the place of that chain 1. Right now we're looking at the right side of our work. That's the front side. We're going to flip it around so that we're looking at the back side, the wrong side. Then I'm going to insert my hook into the chain 1 space. It's right here to the left of where my hook currently is. If you're looking at your chain space, you'll see here on the bottom corner is a stitch, and then right on top of that is another stitch. You want a single crochet right in between those. That's where the chain 1 space from your previous square is going to be. So I'm just going to insert my hook right into that stitch, yarn over, pull through, and complete a single crochet. That single crochet is going to take the place of a chain 1 for our new square. Now we're going to rotate our fabric back around so we're looking at the front side, and we're going to work our last single crochet of that chain space as normal. And the reason why I work a single crochet here and not a slip stitch is because it gives me the slack that I need for that corner to lay flat. Now we're going to single crochet all the way across. Here we've reached the next corner. We're going to work single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. Then we'll rotate it and we'll work all the way down. Before I work my last stitch, this is where we're going to get ready to join our next square. So in the next chain space, we're only going to work 1 stitch, 1 single crochet. And I'm going to grab my new square. I'm going to line it up. Here's my slip stitch join at the top that matches the other square. Here's the bottom right chain space that corresponds to the chain space I just worked into, because you want your stitches to line up and match. And I'm just going to rotate that a little so I can comfortably work a single crochet in that chain space. And then I'll just continue my pull loop through, join all the way up. Here I've reached the next chain space on my current square. I'm going to work the first single crochet as normal and pull loop through. Now we need to work the next stitch that's going to take the place of the chain 1. So I'm going to flip my fabric over to the wrong side, and then the chain space is right there to the left of where your hook currently is. And remember, you could go back to the chain space. You can see there's the stitch on the bottom and a stitch on the top, and we want to insert right in between that. Yarn over, pull through, and complete a single crochet. Here's a look from the back side. You can see that you're working over that chain 1 space that's right there. That's just us connecting our current square to our previous square. And the size of this stitch takes the place of the chain 1 from our current square. Now I'll flip it back to the right side. In that same chain space of my new square, work the last single crochet, and then I'll single crochet all the way across. And this is where I'm going to pause. I'm going to work the rest of mine off camera, You continue to work that manner all the way across as many squares as you have. So here in the next corner of this current square, you'll work a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet as normal down the side, 1 single crochet into the bottom left chain space, and then you'll bring in your next square. You'll work a single crochet into that corresponding chain space, pull loop through all the way up, working the first single crochet of this chain space. Then you'll flip your fabric, single crochet into the chain space from your previous square, flip the fabric back around, work the last single crochet into that chain space, and then work all the way across. When you work your very last square, you're not going to work down the side of it. So let's say this was my very last square here. I would just work 1 single crochet into that top chain space. And that's to prepare for the next row. So I'm going to go ahead and finish my row out, and then I will come back to you. Now I'm going to start the row that's on the top. So here's my next square that I'm going to join right above it. And as I lay this out, I'm just making sure that it's laying the same exact way as this one. So here's my chain 2 here on the bottom square, and there's my chain 2. So it matches, they're consistent. This is how I'm going to join mine so that when it's joined, it looks exactly like this. Just like we lined up our squares on the bottom, we're going to line up our squares on the top so that they match up. I just finished working a single crochet into the top left chain space, and my new square above it, the bottom left chain space is what corresponds to it. That's where I'm going to work my first single crochet. So I'm just going to rotate that so I can work comfortably. And I'm actually going to rotate my whole entire piece since I'm going to be working on this side. So I've just worked my first single crochet here. I'm going to pull loop through into the corresponding stitch. And just like we worked all the rest, you're just going to single crochet all the way across and pull loop through into the corresponding stitch. And we've reached the first chain space, single crochet as normal, and pull loop through into the last stitch there. Now we need to work the stitch that's going to be equal to the chain 1 space. And that stitch is going to be worked over here to the right, right above where your crochet hook is in that top stitch join. That's where we're going to be working it. So here's the right side of my fabric. I'm going to flip it and rotate it so I can work into that center join from the previous row's 2 squares. I want to work into the top center. I'm going to single crochet into that stitch, the top center stitch in between the 2 squares. So that is just to the left of where your crochet hook currently is. And when you insert your hook here, you're going to insert directly through the stitch of the join on the other side. So it's going to go into the center of that top stitch. And then complete your single crochet. And it's a little bit tight, so just be patient with it. And then I'll rotate my fabric back. I'll grab my next square. I'm lining it up. My chain is over here on the left, so the new square has the chain here on the left. And I'm going to work into the corresponding chain space that matches my next chain space. And then I'll pull loop through as normal. And before I continue too far, yes, we do have a space in between our squares. When we work the next row, we're going to work in the middle of those squares and join them as well. So we want that space to be there so that it has enough room for the 2 rows of single crochet that are going to be in there. Here's my next chain space, single crochet as normal, pull loop through, flip and rotate my fabric to the wrong side. I want to work into the center stitch of the join from that previous row's 2 squares, and that is just to the left of where your crochet hook currently is. Insert right into the center, and as you do that, you're going to insert it as well into the center of that join. So if you're looking from the right side, it's right in the center. You want it to line up perfectly. And then I'll complete my single crochet. Then I'll rotate my fabric back, grab my next square, lining it up with the chain 2 on the left, and I'm going to insert into the next chain space that coordinates with the previous row's chain space. And I'll just continue working all the way across. It still has that gap in there. That's exactly what we want. As I continue down the row, I will just keep adding squares. And when I get to the very end, I'm going to crochet up the side. So when I get to this last chain space of the row, I will come back, show you the corner and working up the side. And I'm going to go over the single crochets here in the center one more time. I've reached the end. Now I'm working into the chain space. I'm going to single crochet as normal, pull loop through into the last stitch there. And now we'll work the stitch that's going to be equivalent to our chain 1. So we're flipping the fabric over, so we're working from the wrong side. And just like you were joining the squares before, you're going to do it. You're going to single crochet right there to the left into the chain space of the previous row's square. Then we'll flip the fabric back over. And this is where the repeat restarts. When we first started, we worked up the side of the square, we worked over, and then we worked down the square. That's exactly what we're going to do here. And I just want to show you a little bit one more time, since it looks a little bit different now that the squares are joined. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to single crochet back into that chain space I just worked into, single crochet into each stitch up, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet into the corner chain space, single crochet over, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet into the next chain space, and single crochet down. And when I get down here, then I'll show you the joining process. Alright, so here we are at the bottom chain space. I'm going to work 1 single crochet as normal, Then I'm going to rotate my fabric, and we have been working from the wrong side. From now on, we're going to be working this stitch only in this part of the repeat from the right side, which is the side that's facing us. We're going to insert our hook directly down into the center join. I have 2 loops on my hook there, and I'm going to complete a single crochet. Then I'm going to work into the chain space of the next square and single crochet, pull my loop up and pull loop through. The rest is just as before, single crochet into the next stitch, pull loop through, and continue all the way up. Here in the chain space at the top, single crochet as normal, pull loop through into the last stitch, and this is where we are going to flip it. This is the wrong side now. Insert your hook into the chain space from the previous square and complete a single crochet. Flip back to the right side, single crochet into that chain space as normal and across the top. Here I'll work my corner as normal, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, and work down the side. I've reached the chain space, 1 single crochet, rotate it so I can work directly in the join in the center of all the squares. I have 2 loops on my hook and complete a single crochet. In the next square, single crochet into the chain space and pull loop through. And that is the same process that we're going to repeat all the way across the row here until you get to the end. Once you get to the end, you're going to stop with just 1 single crochet here in the top left chain space, and then you'll repeat the row across. You'll put your square here, making sure to line them up so that they match, and work across. I think this repeat is a little bit easier because it's literally just a straight line across. And the one that's a little bit more involved is the one where I'm currently at. And those are the 2 repeats that you have until you complete the whole entire project. I am going to work off camera, and when I finish, it's going to be finished on this repeat of joining the squares and ending in the top left chain space. And when I get to this point, I'll come back on camera and I will show you how to finish up the border. Alright, I just finished working my very last row, joined the squares together, and I'm at the left chain space. You can stop working the border at any time after we finish completing the first round here. Or you can make it larger by just continuing more rounds. So right now, here on the bottom right corner is where we started our border. Then we worked all the way up the side. This is our last row over here, top right corner, and then we worked across. So we need to finish working down the side on the left and then across the bottom until we get back to the very beginning, and that will complete the first round of the border. So from here, I've worked one single crochet into the left chain space. I'm going to work a chain 1 and one single crochet back into that stitch to complete that corner. Then I'll work down the side the same as normal, single crochet into each single crochet and chain space. And when I come to the next corner, I'm going to work a single crochet in that chain space. I want to work the next single crochet in the center of the join in between these two squares. So I'm just going to look for a center stitch point and insert my hook. And it might be tough because the stitches are twisted and you're working into the side of them here. So I just inserted my hook right there in the center. I have 2 loops on my hook and I'm completing a single crochet. And in the next chain space, I'm going to single crochet. And then I'll just continue single crocheting here across the side. In the next corner chain space, one single crochet. Then I've reached the center join. I'm going to try to find the center of that join as close to the edge as possible. Insert my hook. I have 2 loops on my hook right now. Yarn over and pull through to complete a single crochet. And then next corner chain space, one single crochet. And you'll just continue working that way all the way down the side. I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera. Here I've reached the next corner chain space. It's the same as before, single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, and then we rotate so that we can work across the bottom edge here. And you're going to do the same exact thing as you were doing down the side. Single crochet across, single crochet in the center join as close to the edge as possible, single crochet across, all the way until we get to the beginning chains. I've reached the beginning chain space where our first single crochet was worked. I'm going to work one single crochet in that chain space. I'll chain 1 and then insert my hook into the first stitch, picking up both loops, and complete a slip stitch. And now the first round of our border is finished. At this point, you can fasten off at any time, working however many rounds of the border that you would like to get your desired size. Each round will add about 1/2 inch. I'm going to work my rounds in simple single crochet stitches just like I've done here. So to begin the next round and any rounds after that, I'm going to just chain 1, single crochet into the very first stitch, and single crochet into each stitch all the way across. That's going to give me a very simple flat border. You will have a small seam here depending on how many rounds that you work. When you get to the corner, here's a corner for example, we have a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet. I am going to follow the same exact stitch pattern, so I will single crochet all the way up to the first single crochet of that chain space. In the chain space, I'm going to work a single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, and then I will continue to work single crochet all the way around. When I get back to the beginning here, I'm just going to slip stitch join. Guys, thanks so much for watching my video. You'll find the free crochet pattern for this linked in the description box below. Please smash that like button and hit subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one.